Hello and welcome to The Wire. I'm Siddharth Vardarajan. Counting of votes is still underway, but already the picture in the 5 states which went to the polls roughly 6 weeks ago, the results, the emerging picture is more or less clear. In Uttar Pradesh, which was the largest and politically most important state, the BJP is all set to come back to power, perhaps with a reduced majority. The number of seats where the BJP is leading in is around, or BJP plus, BJP and its allies are leading in, is roughly 50 to 60 seats less than what they won in 2017, but nevertheless heading towards a convincing win. In Punjab, Aam Aadmi Party has swept the elections by all accounts. We still don't have actual results coming in such great volume, but in terms of leads, a landslide win for the Aam Aadmi Party at the cost of the Congress, which has lost control of the state government. In Uttarakhand, the Bharatiya Janata Party is again all set to return to power. Its victory in terms of seats quite convincing. And in Goa, the BJP is the single largest party, although perhaps 1 or 2 seats short of a majority, but going by previous experience and the BJP skill, quote unquote, in stitching together coalitions, it's a foregone conclusion that the Bharatiya Janata Party will form the government in Goa. And of course, in Manipur, again, a convincing win by the Bharatiya Janata Party. So in the 5 states which went to the polls, 1 was ruled by the Congress, 4 were ruled by the Bharatiya Janata Party. As far as the BJP is concerned, today's results add up to a clean sweep, 4-0. And even though it has lost some ground in terms of the total number of seats that it's likely to win in Uttar Pradesh, the fact that its share of the popular vote has actually gone up by roughly 3% will give it some cause for cheer. This is the BJP's vote share in 2022 assembly elections compared to what it polled in 2017. Although, of course, we must note that the BJP's vote share in this round of the of voting in the 22 assembly elections is roughly 5 to 6% less than what the NDA plus what the BJP polled in the 2019 Lok Sabha elections, and I will explain as we go along why that comparison, may well be significant. But joining me to discuss the results, but more importantly, the implication of these results for national politics as we move forward, in particular towards the 2024 general election, is a great panel. I have Apurvanand with me in the studio here. He is a professor of Hindi at Delhi University and, of course, a long-standing political analyst and activist involved in numerous causes. I have also with me Seema Chishti, who, after a long career, first in the BBC and then at the Indian Express, is now one of the editors of the India Cable and, of course, a frequent contributor to newspapers and TV channels on a whole range of issues, but particularly in politics. And she also got to travel during this election in Uttar Pradesh. And I have Rajesh Mahapatra, former editor-at-large at the Hindustan Times, and again, a keen observer of national politics. Welcome to the discussion, Apurvanand, Seema, and Rajesh. And I want to start, Seema, with you. The big picture is clear now. I don't think the contours are going to change. So it's 4-0 in favor of BJP in the states where it held power, and a dramatic upset in Punjab where the Aam Aadmi Party has blown away the Congress. Let's begin our discussion by trying to unpack or trying to understand what the implications for national politics might be from today's results.
Okay, so watching how other channels and everybody likes the phrase semi-final, I think that's like a pretty bad term. So let me get it out of the way. There is no semi-final, but I think this is a very significant election in the BJP era. So it almost marks the kind of, a BJP era, the BJP coming into fifth gear for a whole lot of reasons. I just want to point out to three major implications on national politics. The first is that there was so far a kind of understanding that Mr. Modi loses state elections. That's been the case since 2017. It is just he has got this cult presence. So the BJP really does not have entrenched kind of spaces in Indian politics, and it's still moving along different kind of wheels, make it move. I think this election, because it spans across the country, there is Goa, there is Punjab, there is UP, there is Manipur, and everywhere seeing the BJP kind of emerge on top should give it a lot of kind of make it feel very good. Number two, and the most significant thing also, is that in the face of kind of deep economic distress, major kind of economic crisis with what happened in UP in terms of corpses in the Ganga, etc., being kind of disconnected with voter choices. So I want to say that it is incorrect to kind of say now that, they voted for the economy, etc., and they may have done this. I don't think it is a Labharti vote, etc., which have pulled them over so convincingly and increased their vote share by 3%, and that may rise more. We must understand this is voting for a completely different reason. And that's why this is significant to national politics, that the whole way of viewing politics as being something where there is an incumbency, an understanding of how anti-incumbency works, and unemployment, gharibi, increasing kind of, economic mess will lead to necessarily a shift in government. We're looking at a very clear ideological vote. The BJP has been crystal clear in campaigning on the issues that it did. TheWire did a very good analysis of the kind of things that Adityanath went out and said. And he very openly campaigned on this. And I think almost from the very genteel separateness which Mr. Modi campaigned on, which is bad enough, when he spoke of Shamshan versus Kabristan in 2017. What we saw this time was things like, I know that an Amethi Vidhayak said things like, Dadhi noch denge, agar aap vote karte hain Sapa ko, to aap mein Miya logon ka khoon hai. So there was no absence of clarity. And that has got the vote. So I think that has immense significance nationally. And I think the third thing which concerns now the opposition space, with AAP making a huge kind of doing so well in Punjab, tells you almost that we're now truly in a new phase of politics where it's not just about the ruling party, but it's about the opposition too. So all parties that swear by social justice, that think of other ways of doing politics, that hark back to a different playbook, if you like, they seem to be out of the reckoning. They're not doing well. And particularly in the seats where there are no significant minorities, etc., those who are countering the BJP also come from this post-2011 or post-2014 opposition sphere. It is no longer so. I think the whole idea that old ideas, old things, very tested, tried, robust political moves will allow a counter to the politics in play have been challenged. So to think of some kind of an old identity way of doing things, the voter seems quite set in an ideological way. And it's not just the polity and politics, it's the people also who are showing this. And I think we must be very square up in recognizing that. And I think each of these things, the fact that it is no longer BJP not being able to make state politics and doing it only at the back of Mr. Modi's persona, etc. Number two, of everybody in old parties also being able to, with a little bit of thok bajawing, being able to score against the BJP, that belief is shaken. And number three, the connect between economic well-being, your own well-being, your understanding of self-interest, which is the basis of modern democratic politics, that you move to a completely different sphere of why this vote is being cast. That, I think, would be the three broad takeaways.
So is it your understanding that, just to clarify, if I build on your second point, is it your understanding that the BJP's victory and the slight increase in its vote share from 39.5% to roughly 42.5% is the product of more communal campaigning? Because in 2017, that campaigning was also present. Is it your sense that it's the communalism that has given it that edge, and not the various schemes? Because a lot of reporters were going around saying that this is sort of Hindutva plus welfare, or welfareist Hindutva. That was a factor. You are discounting the welfare factor and saying that it's the communal politics that helped it grow?
I think so. So, I mean, of course, it is for kind of analysts later to analyze. There'll be post-poll things. I don't know exactly what, but intuitively, I think that got a response, because what is it that the BJP very openly said? Mr. Yogi would come to his rallies and put out 2 bulldozers. So, in bulldozers, in sort of his saying that don't make it like Kerala, West Bengal, or J&K. It was not about statistics. So, I think a lot of analysts also tried to dress it up and say, no, look at social figures, etc. But basically, what he was talking about was a Muslim share. So I think beyond the pro-Hindu vote, he brought the energy and the kind of politics that the Hindu Yuva Vahini used to do straight into the CM's office. And that clearly has, the BJP would be well within its rights to interpret that as a pro-Hindu, anti-Muslim vote, and a vote to kind of, because Mr. Adityanath is not just talking about these things, but he's kind of executed and run a kind of a government which has been reported on widely and is well known in the past 5 years, and he made no bones about it. That
Right.
obviously had got endorsed by a very significant section. So yes, I would say that.
Okay. So, Rajesh, if I can turn to you, we would like to hear from you your sense of the national implications, but I want to just leave one direct question with you first, which is that building on what Seema just said, if indeed this is the case, and if I take as a corollary to that an added bit of evidence, which is that it does seem as if there has been a significant consolidation of Muslim votes in favor of the Samajwadi Party. I saw a tweet by the Hindu's data editor where he analyzed vote swings in Dalit and Muslim districts or seats where Dalits and Muslims are a significant chunk of voters. And what he found was that there has been a major collapse in the vote share of the Bahujan Samaj Party and Congress in both of these groups of seats, and the bulk of those votes have gone to the Samajwadi Party. In the Muslim districts, the shift is almost 100%, and in the Dalit seats, the shift is around 75% to Samajwadi and 25% to the BJP. So the question that I want you to ponder over is, if in fact the return of the BJP in UP is the product of a further communalization of the BJP's campaigning, and if Muslims have also responded to that by consolidating their vote with the Samajwadi Party and ensuring that none of their votes goes to the BJP, what does that mean for how the next 5 years in Uttar Pradesh are going to go in terms of communal relations? Does this mean the sense of siege and the sense that they were being targeted, which many Muslims have spoken about, is going to deepen? So that's the one narrow UP-related question. But broadly speaking, do tell us what you think are the big national takeaways from this result.
I'll take that question, but before that, let me just place my thoughts about how I see the national implications. I think first and foremost thing is that this is a big boost to Bharatiya Janata Party and its leadership at the center. What you're going to see, and which is what BJP has done always in the past, that it takes electoral victories as a vindication of the policies that it pursues. It doesn't. I mean, we saw that when demonetization was rolled out, we know that it weighed the economy with the pain. We still continue to, the economy continues to feel it. But they took the 2017 electoral victory and sort of presented it as a vindication of demonetization being the right step because Janta has endorsed it. So that's what the BJP is going to do after this victory, which is quite emphatic given the backdrop against which it comes, that inflation, unemployment, economic distress, the aftermath of Corona, all that. To think of a victory like this, it is quite emphatic, and they're going to cash in on this. They're going to get aggressive with everything that what's trying to do. So first and foremost thing you're going to see, they are going to come back on the farm laws. They are going to come back on the farm laws. They are going to aggressively push privatization. Uh, they are going to push the national education policy, a big thing now on the RSS agenda. All of such policy stances or policy measures that you would expect from a cultural populist leadership is going to get a boost. And when they do that, all of those economic difficulties or hardship that we were talking about, or the social discontent that we were talking about, are going to get aggravated, in time to come. They're not going to go away. So, on one hand, you would see this as a big boost for BJP's politics. You would see that they would aggressively pursue all those policies that kind of they wanted to go through, but in the last 6 months or so, we see that they went slow on some of the things, they withdrew some of the things, and they're going to come back to the drawing board again. That's the first thing I think. On the side of the opposition, uh, I think uh, you know uh, there are some there is a silver line. I think Akhilesh hasn't done badly. Let's put it, to go from 21%, or if I add the 3% of Congress that he had in the last election, even then, I think the final count, when it comes, uh, SP would have touched somewhere close to 32%, or it would have probably gone beyond 32%. That's a good swing. I mean, to get 7 to 8% in your favor is not bad, and you're not getting this 7 to 8% just by virtue of only the Muslim votes which have shifted from BSP. You're also adding from a few other quarters. So
In
that's
fact, it would be 11% swing actually if he hits 32.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's a good sign. It tells you that he did try to cash in on it. But you see, the big problem, the big concern, actually, there are some questions that as journalists we should be raising, and we are not raising them enough. That you see, here is a party which is a 24/7 election machinery. Now, what you call it, it engages in 24/7 uh, election propaganda. Uh, it is not 24/7 politics. We expect political leaders to be doing 24/7 politics, not propaganda, not electioneering. Now, this particular no other party can match it, or no other party should try to match it, because political parties are supposed to be in politics, not just in electioneering. Because at the end of the day, if you are so focused on propaganda, then you don't deliver anything, and that's what we see. But what has happened, Siddharth, there are a lot of things that, because people lack so much when it comes, the opposition of BJP. Look at some of the data that I am going to throw at you. There has been a drop of almost 5 percentage point in the number of voters, share of voters in the age group of 18 to 29. Indian Express carried a story, a data story. Nobody talked about it. Now, if you have had a 5 percentage point fall in the share of the youth voter, and at a time when you are talking about Berozgari,
You're talking of turnout. Are you talking in terms of turnout, voter turnout, right?
no. They are named in the voter list. The voter list.
Okay.
The updated voter list, there is a 5 percentage fall in youth voters. They simply have not been registered. The pretext is Corona. Now, no political party took it up before the election. Okay, so I'm saying opposition is not expected to do 24/7 electioneering. We don't expect that. But you need to be alert, visual, and responsive to certain things. No political party made an issue out of it. Now, look, in this election, this is becoming an issue. 3 percentage point voting. The second thing which nobody is looking at, nobody is asking that at 7 p.m., the voter turnout figure in several constituencies where it was significantly lower saw a sharp revision, ranging from 2% to 7 or 8%. How could that happen? Nobody raised those questions. Look, it is out of fashion to raise these questions. But there is something going wrong with the way elections are being held. We are not able to put our finger on it. But we need to ask these questions. As journalists, we need to ask these questions. As political parties, we need to be alert. Now, let me give you an example. Take the classic case of Ayodhya. On the day, a day after, it was 54%. A day after, it had gone up to 54.95%. 2 days after, it was 58%. Then the EC issued a final revised voter turnout data the 4 or 5 days later, and it turned out to be 60.7%. Now, from 53.85 or 54% to 60 points, it's almost a 7 percentage point change. Now, look, where is it coming from? It is coming from probably postal ballots. Or is it coming from some votes that were not counted even for the next 48 hours? Is that possible? Nobody is asking these questions. So there are certain things which are going wrong, and these are a serious concern. In terms of, you ask me what are the implications for the future, I think the way elections are being held, the way protocols are being observed, or the way things are being managed need greater scrutiny, not only by the political parties, but by media and every other organization that are associated with our, are keen to safeguard our democracy. So that's the second thing. The third thing that I want to come to, Siddharth, is that there is a problem here with Congress in these outcomes. It is clearly showing that the Congress's troubles are far from over, and there is something. I mean, there is a serious concern about where the Congress is going. My sense, I will say, out of these 3 elections, having traveled across Uttar Pradesh, I think where they had a fantastic campaign plan. I'm getting a sense, Siddharth, that Congress leadership is surrounded by activists. They lack strategists. In order to, do well in the electoral space and to do well in politics, to revive a party that has fallen so badly, you need a good vision, a good strategy, and good people who can execute them well. I think Congress is similar on all these 3 aspects. That is again getting reflected in this debate. However, for other opposition parties, there is nothing to lose heart. SP, all said and done, has done well. In fact, its allies have not done that well. SP has done reasonably well. Yes, it could have done even better, but fair enough. They have done their job.
Right.
2 is that AAP has done well, which means if there is a space coming up, there is space for new parties, there is space for a new face, there is space for a new narrative. So you don't have to lose heart that BJP is all over the place. So that's the way. Let me come to the specific question that you asked. I think the BSP's decimation in this election needs greater scrutiny as to what is happening to the churning within that. And this is worrisome because, yes, the Muslim chunk have shifted there. There are some other Dalit votes that have gone to BJP, which looks like is more than what one had expected. But the bigger thing that how BSP has impacted this election, by staying Mayawati, by staying away from the campaign, by not running a campaign at all, the BSP, there was hardly any campaign. There was no narrative that was being offered from BSP to its own supporters. What would have happened when BSP, if it had stayed active, what does BSP talk about? BSP amplifies the social justice campaign. BSP amplifies the campaign against the attacks on the constitution, the attacks against reservation. Those things do a lot in kind of putting up roadblocks to assimilation of all these castes and subcastes into the larger Hindutva fold. The BSP's silence has certainly helped BJP in kind of spreading its Hindutva tentacles and holding many of these groups. And clearly, its alliance with Nishad, which is asking to be listed as scheduled caste, has definitely helped it. Nishad Party alone is winning 3 seats, and if you see many of the places where Nishad Party has some influences, BJP has done well. It has chosen, among the smaller parties, probably it has chosen the right parties, and SP probably ended up with some people who, in retrospect, have proved to be more of a liability than an asset. And SP, that's where I will put my case, and then I will go along with this.
Right. Apurvanand, you've heard what Seema and Rajesh have argued. दो सवाल हैं राष्ट्रीय इसके implications इस नतीजे के, इन नतीजों के, और दूसरा खासतौर पे उत्तर प्रदेश में आप how do you see the situation evolving in terms of what how the BJP will govern UP and nationally over the next few years? What happens to the opposition space at the national level? And how do you assess the emergence of the Aam Aadmi Party in Punjab?
हाँ, अगर मैं मोटा मोटी जो राजेश ने और सीमा ने कहा है उससे प्राय सहमत हूँ। एक तो अगर ये पूरे भारत का चुनाव था, क्योंकि मणिपुर, गोवा, उत्तराखंड और उत्तर प्रदेश और की आप बात कर रहे हैं, तो आप ये नहीं कह सकते कि ये सिर्फ उत्तर भारत का चुनाव था। और इस चुनाव में भारतीय जनता पार्टी को निश्चित तौर पर एक निर्णायक बढ़त मिली है, ये दिखलाई पड़ता है। तो ये भारतीय जनता पार्टी के लिए एक बहुत आश्वस्त करने वाली बात है कि उसकी जो भी नीतियां थी, उसकी जो भी राजनीति थी, नीति और राजनीति दोनों को ये जनता का प्राय समर्थन प्राप्त है। और यह निश्चय ही विचारधारात्मक वोट है। यह वोट कोई आर्थिक कारणों से दिया गया वोट नहीं है। यह बात पहले आ चुकी है, इसलिए मैं इसको दोहरा नहीं रहा हूँ, क्योंकि अगर आर्थिक कारणों से दिया गया वोट होता तो उत्तर प्रदेश में वोट अलग होने चाहिए थे, नतीजा अलग आना चाहिए था। तो यह विचारधारात्मक वोट है, और विचारधारात्मक वोट जिसे हम सरलीकृत ढंग से हिंदू राष्ट्र कहते हैं उसके लिए है। और यह अल्पसंख्यकों के विरुद्ध है, उनके अधिकारों के विरुद्ध। यह बहुत स्पष्ट है, इसका राष्ट्रीय संदेश बहुत स्पष्ट है, उत्तर प्रदेश का भी, उत्तराखंड का भी और दूसरी जगहों का भी। तो यह, अगर आप राष्ट्रीय राजनीति के बारे में पूछ रहे हैं तो यह मेरी समझ है, जो दूसरे लोगों से बहुत अलग नहीं है। लेकिन जो दूसरा चिंता का विषय है वह यह कि यह जो नतीजा है, यह जिसे हम रूल ऑफ लॉ कहते हैं, उसके लिए बहुत बुरी खबर है। क्योंकि उत्तर प्रदेश में जिस तरह शासन चला है पिछले 5 साल, जिसको अब छिपाया भी नहीं गया, कहा गया कि यह बुलडोजर का शासन है, तो इसका मतलब अब हम रूल ऑफ लॉ की बात करना छोड़ दें। और इसका दूसरा अर्थ यह है कि यह सबसे बड़ी चुनौती अब न्यायपालिका के लिए है कि क्या वो इसे सुरक्षित रख पाएगी, क्योंकि बहुत सारे मुकदमे अब सर्वोच्च न्यायालय के पास हैं, इलाहाबाद उच्च न्यायालय के पास है, लखनऊ पीठ के पास हैं, और उत्तर प्रदेश सरकार बहुत सारे मामलों में मुख्य प्रतिवादी होगी। तो क्या इस रूल ऑफ लॉ की अब रक्षा हो पाएगी राष्ट्रीय स्तर पर? क्योंकि लोग ये कहेंगे कि देखिए, मतदाता ने बुलडोजर के लिए वोट दिया है, तो अब तो बुलडोजर चलेगा। आपने मध्य प्रदेश में भी देखा था कि मांझे से एक दुर्घटना हो गई थी, ये पतंग उड़ाने वाला जो मांझा होता है, और फौरन ही जिला प्रशासन ने उस मांझा बेचने वाले के घर को गिरा दिया। ये एक बहुत विचित्र बात थी कि मांझे से किसी की दुर्घटना हो रही है उस गले में लग जाने से, और आप उसके घर को जाकर गिरा दे रहे हैं। यह अब दूसरे प्रदेशों में बढ़ेगा, खासकर भारतीय जनता पार्टी वाले प्रदेशों में। आपने विपक्ष के बारे में पूछा कि विपक्ष को लेकर स्थितियों में भ्रम पैदा होगा, इसलिए कि कांग्रेस कमजोर हुई है, और इन नतीजों को लेकर यह निष्कर्ष निकाला जाएगा कि कांग्रेस का कोई भविष्य नहीं है। कांग्रेस में एक हताशा भी आ सकती है, और उत्तर प्रदेश में जो लड़ने का जज्बा दिखलाई पड़ा था कांग्रेस में, उस पर पानी भी पड़ सकता है। यह कहना जो राजेश कह रहे थे कि समाजवादी पार्टी, यानी अपोजिशन को पूरी तरह से दिल नहीं हारना चाहिए, क्योंकि समाजवादी पार्टी के का वोट शेयर भी बढ़ा है, उसकी सीटें भी बढ़ी हैं। मेरा ख्याल है कि आप इसको कह सकते हैं कि ये डेस्परेट वोट्स थे जो समाजवादी पार्टी की तरफ गए, जो सामान्य परिस्थिति में शायद समाजवादी पार्टी की तरफ नहीं जाते। तो क्या ये डेस्परेट वोट्स जो इस बार इस उम्मीद में चले गए थे कि सरकार बदल जाएगी, क्या वे आने वाले समय में समाजवादी पार्टी के साथ रह पाएंगे? तो ठीक है, उसे इतनी सीटें मिल गई, लेकिन ये डिस्पैरेट वोट्स फिर हटेंगे और सामान्य जगहों पर जाएंगे। तो भारतीय जनता पार्टी के वोट शेयर में जो 3% की बढ़ोतरी हुई है, या और भी ज्यादा हो सकती है, वो आगे और बढ़ सकती है 2024 में। क्योंकि ये वोट्स वहां से हटकर भारतीय जनता पार्टी के पास जा सकते हैं। इस बार ये सिर्फ इस उम्मीद में गए थे कि समाजवादी पार्टी ही हटा सकती है, लेकिन वो वापस भारतीय जनता पार्टी की तरफ जा सकते हैं। तो कांग्रेस का ह्रास एक बहुत बुरी खबर है विपक्ष की राजनीति के लिए। आम आदमी पार्टी के उठान की बात हो रही है, और यह भी मेरे ख्याल में बहुत बुरी खबर है, क्योंकि आम आदमी पार्टी को मैं आमतौर पर जो दक्षिणपंथी राजनीतिक जगह है वहीं रखता हूं। और आम आदमी पार्टी ने दिल्ली में भी यह साबित किया है, और पंजाब में भी अपने चुनाव प्रचार में उसने साबित किया कि उसके लिए कोई नैतिकता नहीं है, उसके लिए सत्ता और ताकत एकमात्र चीज है, और वो उसके लिए किसी भी चीज का इस्तेमाल कर सकती है। दिल्ली में तो उसने यहां तक साबित किया कि जो उसके मतदाता हैं उनको भी वह हथियारों के हवाले कर सकती है। इसलिए आम आदमी पार्टी का उठना मेरे मन में कोई उत्साह पैदा नहीं करता है, क्योंकि वो मुख्य रूप से उस दक्षिणपंथी जगह को ही बढ़ावा दे रहा है। तो कुल मिलाकर अगर आप ये पूछेंगे कि यह जो नतीजा है इसका अर्थ क्या है, तो इसका अर्थ यह है कि विचारधारात्मक तौर पर हम हिंदू राष्ट्र को और मजबूत होता हुआ देखते हैं, क्योंकि उसके पक्ष में सारा मीडिया अब यह तर्क देने लगेगा कि यह जीत ही उसका एक तर्क है, और हर कोई उसकी व्याख्या करना शुरू कर देगा क्यों यह उचित है। दूसरे कि अब नीति की कोई जगह नहीं रह जाएगी। मैं ये पिछले 5 वर्षों में कहता रहा हूं, जिसको राजेश ने कहा कि भारतीय जनता पार्टी इज the government of BJP is not about policy at all. It's always about politics. And as Rajesh said, it's not even politics. It's elections of winning elections. तो आप 24 घंटा इसी पर काम करते रहते हैं, और आप अपने जनता को आप वोट्स में ही देखते रहते हैं। तो यह चिंताजनक इसलिए है कि हमने सब्जेक्टहुड से सिटीजनहुड की यात्रा की थी। यह बिल्कुल उल्टी यात्रा है, जिसमें हम सब्जेक्टहुड की तरफ जा रहे हैं।
ठीक। I want to give a counter argument at this stage, which is something I love doing at election time, because I think election analysis suffers from a fundamental flaw, which is that we look at the number of seats that parties win. In this case, in Uttar Pradesh, the Bharatiya Janata Party looks like it will get around 270 to 280. And that's clearly a majority of the seats. And from this, we draw all kinds of conclusions about what was in the voters' mind. Whereas I believe that, and Seema, Rajesh, I want you to also come in on this, and Apurna and Abhi. If you want a more accurate reading of what's on the voter's mind, then the vote share, in some sense, is a more accurate proxy for that, right? We often, try to guess what people believe on the basis of opinion polls that represent samples of 7,000, 10,000, 1 lakh, or 2 lakhs. Here you have a vote conducted across Uttar Pradesh, in which the contest was essentially structured around: do you want Modi and Yogi back, or do you want them out? And in that kind of a framing, at least 55% of Uttar Pradesh's voters chose candidates who would have ensured the defeat of the Yogi Modi Sarkar. In other words, 45% of voters appear to have voted for the Modi-Yogi dispensation, and 55% chose not to. It's a different matter that the 55% vote share of the combined opposition does not translate into those many seats. That's the nature of the first past the post system, which India has adopted, and which I'm not questioning at this point, because that's how governments are formed, so be it. Other governments in the past have won on the basis of a minority vote share. But what the vote share tells us is to be a little bit cautious about drawing long-term consequences. So if, Seema, you are right that the BJP's appeal was constructed around communalism, जो अपूर्वानंद जी भी कह रहे हैं कि हिंदू राष्ट्र का एक एक propaganda, and certainly as the Wire has documented in Yogi's speeches, Yogi Adityanath's speeches, this was a constant theme in one way or the other. But if that explains the BJP's vote and support, and that's alarming that 40 to 45% of people would be swayed by that. But surely there is some hope to be derived from the fact that in a campaign fought in this manner, a clear majority of Uttar Pradesh's voters, 55% of them, did not buy into that argument. Does this then tell us that there is space which the opposition needs to tap into, to build on, to try to mobilize through the techniques and mechanics of an election, rather than of getting dispirited, as I'm sure many people in the opposition are feeling? Seema, how would you respond to that?
Well, I mean, dil ko behlane ke liye khayal acha hai ghalib is my initial response, but I don't want to kind of belittle what you're saying. I think it's really good that it is not a 55% vote. Sure. But we can't have different rules for the BJP than we did for previous governments. If it's a critical enough, significant enough majority, which can be in what Romila Thapar has called and termed, and others of her ilk have spoken of, as a creation of a permanent majority, which is what the move from a flawed democracy does if you're moving towards an ethnic democracy. That you just need a critical mass of people to vote you in. And then after you have power, parties that are deeply committed, ideological, and have a plan to kind of recraft the whole business of India, like the BJP does, come back with 3% more votes this time around. So I think I would like to believe that, yes, it's a good thing that it is not the majority of India which believes that, but you don't need a majority of India to believe that to slowly craft a different kind of a republic. So I would still be concerned, and sure, I'd be like really alarmed if they got 90% of the votes, or you had those crazy Musharraf or those crazy military dictatorships run up those votes if he had 97% of the vote, which is actually got. But I would still be alarmed because it's a significant section. 40% is a very high section. When Akhilesh's Samajwadi Party won a historic kind of a first-time big majority in 2012, they won with just 29.2% vote. So by that logic, then I can argue that that's also very little too. So I'm a little hesitant about jumping to vote percentage logic in a first-past-the-post system, because there are a lot of counter examples that can come in. I'm concerned that it's a critically high, significantly high number that makes it. And also the urban vote share should alarm us all. If India, I mean, no doubt UP is still among the most kind of rural of, I think it's only 22.2% of it lives in cities, but we're all moving towards a city current. And if we're unable to have a political response to the BJP in cities amongst urban voters, then that should be a really, because that is in what you say, that is 60%, 70%. And a colleague of mine was saying, citing Firozabad, which is, I think it's more than 60% of the votes have gone to the BJP. So I'm a little wary of that. Sure, it is not 50% of the state, but it's still significant enough in the face of bulldozers being parked outside rallies, and in the face, see, we can keep shying away from the Hindu Rashtra argument. I also probably was one of those who would try and, skirt on the margins, skate around, etc. But we must confront it because the BJP and its chief ministers are making no bones about clarifying that. So we need to kind of see that clearly. And as far as the second very important question you asked, that are there tricks of the trade, manipulations, a little bit of, do I have a toolbox within the electoral scheme of things? Probably not. It's not enough now to just electorally manage, fit up and do things. You will need answers. You will need to kind of excavate the social mechanisms of bringing everything back on the table if you intend countering this. This is something that has, I think, gone beyond just a petty kind of election management or alignments, etc. It'll have to be 24/7 in a very distinct, deep political, and it won't have to be just politics. It'll have to be Samaj. How that's going to happen, who's going to do it, I think that's what concerns me. Sorry.
See, but the reason I asked that question or framed it in that way was not to look for tasalli, although tasalli is always a good thing, but to try to understand what kind of strategy may be more effective for the opposition. And 55% voting, the way they did in an essentially bipolar contest, suggests that there's space. But if you and Apurvanand are right, and Rajesh also to a large extent, in your reading of this BJP plus vote share as largely driven by Hindutva, what this suggests is that maybe the opposition, instead of ducking and shying away from this ideological fight, right? Every reporter who went out into the field in Uttar Pradesh came back with this distinct impression that the Muslims themselves didn't want any open discussion about their plight. They said, and the Samajwadi Party certainly didn't want to highlight the communal politics of the BJP because their fear was that there would be a counter polarization, which happened anyway. Does the answer then lie in Apurva ने अपनी विचारधारात्मक लड़ाई की बात की? Rajesh and Apurva, I'm going to ask you, does the answer, should the opposition be looking now to being more bold about ideological confrontation with the BJP? Right now they have shied away from that. It's very rare for political parties to openly even criticize the BJP for its patronizing, for its patronization of, say, you take the Dharm Sansad, for example. You had the Deputy Chief Minister of UP broadly endorsing by saying that they have the right to say what they want, calls for genocide. And in any functioning democracy, that ought to have led to a barrage of criticism from the opposition parties, but it didn't. So Rajesh and Apurva, आप पहले बताइए कि विचारधारात्मक लड़ाई की जगह है या अगर उन मुद्दों को छेड़ा जाएगा तो कहीं न कहीं बीजेपी को ही फायदा पहुंचने वाला है?
देखिए, ये तर्क तो पुराना पड़ गया और घिस गया कि अगर हम इन मुद्दों को नहीं उठाएंगे तो भारतीय जनता पार्टी को नुकसान होगा और अगर उठाएंगे तो फायदा होगा, क्योंकि ये बिहार में भी कारगर नहीं हुआ, ये उत्तर प्रदेश में नहीं हुआ, ये दूसरी जगहों पे नहीं हुआ। तो फिर तो ये मानना चाहिए ना कि ये तर्क नहीं चल रहा है कि अगर आप इसे छुएंगे नहीं तो ये उठेगा नहीं, क्योंकि ये दूसरी तरफ से उठ रहा है। आप इसे नहीं छू रहे हैं, लेकिन भारतीय जनता पार्टी के सारे नेता, और मैं इस बार सिर्फ आदित्यनाथ को नहीं, आप अगर नरेंद्र मोदी के भाषण सुनेंगे तो वो चतुराई से उन्होंने इस बात को कहा है, सुरक्षा, अपराधियों को जेल भेज दिया गया, और आदित्यनाथ जेल खेल रहे हैं।
और वो इश्तेहार उत्तर प्रदेश सरकार का, वो साफ आप में
इश्तेहार उत्तर प्रदेश सरकार का देखिए, और फिर मेरठ में प्रधानमंत्री का भाषण देखिए। तो इन सबको अगर आप जोड़िए तो भारतीय जनता पार्टी ने अपने विचारधारात्मक प्रचार में कभी कोई कमी नहीं की। दूसरी पार्टियों ने कहा है कि नहीं, हम इसे छुएंगे नहीं क्योंकि हिंदू इससे बिलक जाएंगे हमसे, लेकिन इससे ये बात कहीं गई नहीं है। और इसीलिए मैं कह रहा हूं कि अब शायद उन्हें दूसरा प्रयोग करना चाहिए, साहस पूर्वक उनको बतलाना चाहिए। और मैं फिर कहूंगा, यह खतरा उठा करके लोग कहेंगे कि नहीं ये तो बिल्कुल ही नगण्य था, लेकिन शायद प्रियंका गांधी ने इसको चुनाव प्रचार के बाद के चरण में एक दूसरे ढंग से कहना शुरू किया, जब उन्होंने जनता को यह कहना शुरू किया कि आप दरअसल जाति और धर्म पर वोट देते हैं तो फिर आपको सरकार कैसे मिलेगी। लेकिन अभी भी यह बहुत स्पष्ट नहीं था, क्योंकि समाजवादी पार्टी इसको छू नहीं रही थी, दूसरी पार्टियां इसको छू नहीं रही थी। लेकिन इसे हम इस तरह से देखें, जो आम आदमी पार्टी के आने के बाद दिल्ली में तर्क दिया गया था और योगेंद्र यादव जैसे लोगों ने तर्क दिया था कि अब विचारधारा का युग चला गया और अब दरअसल सड़क, पानी, बिजली, यानी अब गवर्नेंस की पॉलिटिक्स का समय आ गया है। लेकिन आखिरकार आम आदमी पार्टी निकली क्या? आम आदमी पार्टी आखिरकार एक हिंदू पार्टी ही निकली। उसने पंजाब में भी इस बार,
लेकिन ध्रुवीकरण जिस तरह से पहले भी आपने कहा कि दक्षिणपंथी पार्टी है, ये डेफिनेटली एक एनालिसिस है, लेकिन उनमें और बीजेपी में फर्क तो है कि बीजेपी जिस तरह से धर्म के आधार पे समाज का ध्रुवीकरण करता है, आम आदमी पार्टी तो नहीं करता।
नहीं, आम आदमी पार्टी एक दूसरे ढंग से करता है और आम आदमी पार्टी ने इसमें कोई कमी नहीं की है। इस बार भी राघव चड्ढा ने जो बयान दिया वहां जाकर, उसके पहले गुजरात में जो मनीष सिसोदिया का बयान आप देखें, और पंजाब में एक से अधिक बयान देखें। और हम सिर्फ ये ना देखें कि चुनाव प्रचार के दौरान क्या बयान दिया जा रहा है, क्योंकि पार्टी तो लोगों के पास एक अर्थ लेके जाती है। उसके पहले उसने दिल्ली में क्या किया पिछले 3 सालों में, वह भी तो वो पार्टी है, उसका अर्थ है जो लोगों को कम्युनिकेट हो रहा है। उसमें आप ऐड कर सकते हैं कि उसने ठीक उन 25 दिनों में क्या कहा, लेकिन उसके पहले 3 साल तक वो क्या कहती रही उसको आप इग्नोर नहीं कर सकते हैं। इसलिए मैं कह रहा हूं कि आम आदमी पार्टी एक बहुत चालाक तरीके से ध्रुवीकरण करती है, और दिक्कत सिर्फ यह है कि वह मुसलमानों को यह कहते हैं कि तुम्हारे पास चारा नहीं है, जो दिल्ली में उसने किया। लेकिन उसने बहुत क्रूरतापूर्वक फिर मुसलमानों को हिंसा के सामने अकेला छोड़ दिया। और सिर्फ उतना ही नहीं, अगर हिंसा के समय
दंगों का जिक्र कर रहे हैं
2020 में जो हिंसा हुई मुसलमानों पर, आप अगर ठीक हिंसा के समय को छोड़ दें 4-5 दिनों को, तो उसके बाद कॉम्पेंसेशन को देख लीजिए। वह तो आम आदमी पार्टी के हाथ में था, उस सरकार के हाथ में था। उसमें उसने हिंदुओं को बहुत डिस्टिंक्टली मैसेज दिया कि मुसलमान अब आपकी रहम पर हैं और हम आपकी पार्टी हैं।
Rajesh, before I come to you, I want to introduce to our viewers Javed Ansari, another seasoned reporter, worked with the India Today group for years, has been a very steady and visible and highly valued commentator on television, and of course watched the UP elections closely. And so we will also come to you in a second, Javed. But Rajesh, would you care to pick up on this whole question of whether there is space for a sharper ideological battle with the BJP, or do you feel that perhaps, as you said, given that the BJP is likely to intensify its privatization policies and anti-farmer policies and so on, which are going to cause distress for the masses, is it your sense that those would be more fruitful issues for the opposition to focus on in the next few years, or is there also space to confront the Hindu nationalist or the communal agenda of the BJP?
No, absolutely, Siddharth. I'm an optimist, and a reading of history shows that such divisive political agendas have not lasted for long. So I would like to believe that it is possible, absolutely possible, to come up with an ideological narrative to counter the Hindutva narrative. And I see that, the way, if you were to take Rahul Gandhi, the way he's articulating, I think there is a narrative. Unfortunately, that narrative requires a program, that narrative requires an organization, and above all, that narrative requires a language of politics that is to be communicated. I think those three things remain unaddressed, but they are not something which cannot be addressed. And just coming back to the numbers that you threw, there's another way of looking at it. Let me make you a little more happy. So it's not 55-45. The way to look at it is 45% of the 60% people who showed up to vote. So if you look at it that way, it becomes 25% of the total electorate. In other words, this is what Amartya Sen does, when he argues about a pluralistic system of electioneering. So 75% are actually not endorsing this view. And this 75% holds the ray of hope for you, provided you are able to come. So what's happening in a very short, I think I have written for you or somebody else that what we have been seeing in the states where BJP gets defeated, it's basically transactional politics. Okay, and if the regional party has done well in that sphere, they are able to beat BJP. Whether it is Naveen in Odisha, whether it is Mamata in Bengal. But when it comes to the national politics, the fight is ideological. And that's where all the regional parties falter. That's why there is so much confusion. You need an ideological alternative. And unfortunately, that ideological alternative can only come from a national party. And therefore, we all say, it is Congress which can give it, but that waiting for Bodo kind of syndrome is carrying on for too long. So, there is...
But you share, it's tempting to look at the Punjab win of the Aam Aadmi Party, and the fact that it has opened its account in Goa, with winning 2 seats. It also fought in Uttarakhand, but I don't think it managed more than 3.5 to 4% of the vote. But are you as negative on the Aam Aadmi Party as a potential national alternative to the BJP as Apurva on this?
So, I mean, the way I see things today, what is behind BJP's success or what is behind Modi's success to manage this underclass, you get reminded of Roman poet Juvenal, who said that, talked about circuses and breads, right? That's what has been happening. I see Aam Aadmi's party's politics being no different from that. And therefore, I'm saying Aam Aadmi Party cannot provide an ideological narrative to counter BJP's politics. It is actually, in many ways, it is in another reincarnation of BJP. I mean, I think I would tend to agree with Apurva on this. So this has to come from somebody else. I know there are people who are very hopeful for AAP, wherever BJP is not there, and if there is some space, AAP will probably try to cash in on that. But I think, Punjab, let's not, Punjab is just the beginning. Let's not make,
right.
Let's wait. Let's wait for, in 6-7 years is too short a time. I would not come to any conclusion in 7 years saying that things have been cast in stone. I think a lot will change, and even a lot will change now. And even after this defeat, opposition politics can still thrive. I still believe in that.
Okay. Javed, you've joined us at a time when, at a juncture in our conversation where we started by painting a broad brush of what the national implications of these results could be. And if I were to summarize what's been said so far, Seema sees the BJP's performance in Uttar Pradesh as a product of enhanced or reinvigorated communalism. She thinks it's significant that in this round of elections, Modi has managed to buck an earlier negative trend for him, which was that he was very good at winning national elections. But there were a bunch of states which the BJP lost. This seems to have reversed that trend. Rajesh believes that emboldened by this result, the BJP is likely to step up its privatization and other sort of economic policies which are likely to cause distress. Farm laws may be revived in some way or the other. And Apurva also sees the BJP vote in UP as largely a Hindutva vote rather than a transactional. How do you assess what has happened in UP? Because that's the state that you know very, very well. Let's start with that. Your assessment of the result. In particular, what's your explanation for the fact that the BJP's vote share has grown by around 3%, even though its total number of seats has come down? And segueing from there, the implication of the UP result and the other results, Manipur, Goa, Uttarakhand, Punjab, for national politics.
Look, I largely agree with what the others have said, why the BJP has done. Strong undertones of the base has been Hindutva. While Mr. Modi may have refrained from talking about it in as open terms as he did initially, but if you told UP before the onset of elections, the way the middle level, number 2 level leaders were talking about it, the district level leaders were talking about it, and like one journalist said last night on a TV program, that there hasn't been a more naked, blatant communal campaign than this one. Yeah. So that's the base. And then they've built on it through their welfare schemes, through this robust nationalism and cultural stuff. The fact that they were able to distribute these welfare schemes has had a huge impact. One thing which struck me every time I went to UP, even in my own village, people would curse and abuse and say all kinds of things. But then they say, ki wo ration milta hai, tel milta hai. So that, I think, helped them. In addition to the fact that they had these social alliances stitched up, their ruthless organizational skills, the fact that they were able to galvanize and get the voters. And everybody talks of this, killer instinct. I don't know what killer instinct is in politics, but what I certainly believe is that for them this was some kind of a religious zeal, that they had to do it, that this was some kind of a spiritual thing. The fact getting voters out, ensuring that Modi and Adityanath win. This was as if they were fulfilling a religious kind of duty, the kind of passion and the obsession I saw. Of course, the Yadav voters, Akhilesh's Yadav voters are also very much in your face, but they lack the organizational wherewithal. Their aggressiveness, their passion tends to put off people, especially the other smaller castes. And Apurvananji, while I agree with where he's coming from and where Seema are coming from, that there is a time for this, the time has come to draw the ideological line and you fight this battle. While ideologically and intellectually that's a very enticing proposition, electorally I don't think there is too much purchase of it. I do believe, and I hope to God that I'm wrong, but I do believe that the tone and tenor of this country has changed and changed so drastically that people like you, me, and Apurvananji and Seema and Rajesh, we appear to be out of sync. We need to take a really hard look, put our own beliefs on the side and take a hard look on where this country is heading and where and what the people want. This is not, and I know that even at the risk of being misunderstood, I must say this. This is not the country that you and I grew up in. This is not the country that I was brought up in. The very people that I grew up with, the very people who I spent my childhood with, now their reference points, their belief system, they're not the same people now. It's changed so drastically, so dramatically that I find it unbelievable. I didn't know that I will live to see a day, when people who I was with from KG till senior academy and friendships and relationships that you build in school tend to last much longer. While they're still very good friends of mine, but I just see the way I was at a school reunion just 2 days ago in Allahabad, and stuff that I picked up and that I've been picking up, it sometimes leads me to believe that perhaps we've been out of touch, out of sync, and it's time that we opened our eyes and we smelt the coffee, because the tone and tenor of this country has changed.
Seema, in your analysis for the India cable the other day, you looked at the welfare schemes, and we were joking that we're calling it the Labharthi Lab. There is a view that which Javed seems to echo, that the last mile connectivity between the state and the welfare recipient is something that Modi and Yogi, the BJP as a whole, appear to have perfected. Your analysis was interesting because you were looking at the language of the language surrounding these welfare schemes, as to how they were being presented and marketed, not as the rights due to a citizen, but as charity, as the munificence of a Raja, of a monarch, of a Shahanshah. Do you believe, given that this is how Modi and Yogi have done it, and the BJP has done it elsewhere, that this particular approach towards these schemes is going to be deepened and may actually then, even though you felt that this vote was largely driven by Hindutva, that this may actually become a more and more dominant factor, that it will be hard for the opposition to counter?
Yeah, that may well be true, because if they're relying on the deeply rich, if they've managed to stitch this impossible coalition between the Adanis of the world and the really poor who need these, and in a lot of ways, this is no aspirational vote. In a lot of ways, these people have been driven to the abject poverty because of perhaps COVID mismanagement and the economy tanking even more. Not that India did not have its poor, but there's always a sense that tomorrow will be a better day. But now, if that is being kind of pushed through with these schemes, etc., and the way the economic challenges are not going to get any easier. It's going to get grimmer. So I think the BJP to stay in the business, and if it wants to continue doing its privatization number, which will push the economy down a darker path, they will need to really crank up this Labharti machine. And I find it really ironic that a prime minister who stood up in the Rajya Sabha in February 2015 and he trashed the MNREGA, which is the most respected, largest right to work program in the world, and he called it a monument to the Congress's failure, is now relying to a large extent of this slightly perverse, if I may use the phrase, way of organizing recipients of welfare measures. I mean, actually, it shouldn't draw criticism from somebody like me where I come from when a welfare measure is like that. But it's actually seen as divine sort of, Zille Ilahi being kind of kind and delivering this, like the vaccine certificate has a photograph of Mr. Modi, doesn't have my photograph, doesn't have the photograph of a chief medical officer, but it has him. Similarly, the rations and the namak and the tail actually has his photo on it. So I think they'll have to resort to more and more of this if they have to keep up this economics of the super rich and the super poor. So whole aspirations and all are going to go out of the window. So I anticipate a very turbulent, economically speaking, as Rajesh has spoken eloquently, a very turbulent and a very difficult next 2 years, because the economic world is also sort of caving in around India. I just want to very quick thing. I want to just go back to the business of the ideological thing. I agree with Javed, and I didn't intend, and I think it is a very unfair thing to state for opposition parties to go out and fight an ideological battle when the people are telling you something. Political parties are in the business of winning votes. I'm not saying they must appease and behave like AAP, but they're trying their best to not commit on the ideological fault line and lose forever kind of thing. And they're trying to, and I think Akhilesh's campaign is a great tribute to that. So I don't think, he was extremely kind of irreverential about Baba Mukhyamantri, the Chilam. It's very difficult to counter a Mathadhish of East Europe, an upper caste Thakur who is the leader of this really powerful Math in UP, and to contest that. Akhilesh did it with great so I know he was kind of tiptoeing around it. I think that kind of ideological battle that we're talking about, which is at the heart of the world that Javed talks about, which we're all familiar with, which Apurvanand mentioned, with Rajesh and you talk about, that battle has to be fought outside. I can't outsource it to the Congress. I can't outsource it to RJD or to the left. That'll have to be a bigger battle that I'll have to kind of fight other forces and Indians. It's up to them. Because in the kind of democratic framing that we do, that the people know best and they are the sovereign, we the people, you cannot expect opposition parties to come out and suddenly at election times draw this ideological line. They're going to lose everything. Because we know, and the one thing that we've not spoken about, it's the elephant in the room, is the whole information sphere. We know how that has, and the whole systemic sort of tweaking of India, which has created a different operating system within which all this operates. And Hindutva gets Philippe, and it kind of is seen to have a lot of oomph in that context. That will have to be another battle. It cannot be fought electorally by political parties.
On this sort of Labharti's business, essentially, if you look at government policies over the last 3-4 years, one could say कि हानि भी किया आपने और फिर लाभ दिया, in the sense that the damage is caused by the official policy, and then to ameliorate some of its ill effects, rations, etc., given as a kind of charity.
Dard bhi tum, dawa bhi tum, kind of very perverse scenario. It's almost like calling the oppression of your inability to change your religion, and you term it the freedom of religion bill. So it's almost that classic double speak. That's a very patented kind of political way in which they function. I would place the Labharti scheme in the same scheme of things.
Yeah, but Rajesh, in her piece the other day for the India Cable, Seema quoted Nalin Kohli's book on the BJP to highlight the fact that the BJP election strategy appears to have access to or draws on data of these beneficiaries, and a lot of the electoral campaigning, the perpetual electoral campaigning of the BJP is aimed at making a connect with these beneficiaries. How significant do you think the data/IT/media game of how significant a role is that for the BJP? Because they seem to be well ahead of every other party in this game.
It is very significant. I look at it a little differently. I think what is happening is that the lines between the political executive and the permanent executive, that those lines have blurred. I have seen it in my state where Naveen Patnaik rules, and there is literally nobody in the bureaucracy who matters today who has seen any other government other than Naveen Patnaik. So I have always argued that when a particular party tends to become permanent, uh, the permanent executive tends to get political. So, and that's what we see, and it shouldn't happen. But what is very clear, and what Nalin has written, and many others have spoken, is absolutely true. That the brazenness with which not only that the ruling party has access and leverages the database of the government to kind of create its political network, but the brazenness with which the bureaucracy, the permanent executive, participates in that process. That is a bigger concern, and I call this actually Navin model, and that is where the Lavarthi thing comes into play. I during my travels of Uttar Pradesh in several, because this was already there in the air, I tried to actually sit and spend considerable amount of time. In the sense, I've spent with a couple of families almost 2 to 3 hours at a stretch, having tea at their place, because not asking questions directly, because you get into the reverse anthropology syndrome. So I tried to figure out how their minds work, and I have actually done this thing to check if dard kaun deta hai or dawai kaun deta hai. Now, when it comes to dard kaun deta hai, it is attributed to everything else other than the government. But dawai kaun deta hai, so Modi dete hai. So you see, that is the success of what Modi and his party have done in terms of building their narrative, in terms of building their perception. Now look at it. There is no rule of law in UP. They have tried to confuse the people. People take rule of police as rule of law, right? That is what is being endorsed. But who would educate them? How do you educate them? These are challenges that remain. But what Seema said, and that's the saddest outcome of all of this, Siddharth, is that aspirational India is dying. You have these large swaths of our population living on the margins, and you have all these welfare schemes that kind of keep their hope alive, and you use the government machinery, you use your huge political network that you have built up, the RSS, various other affiliates, to kind of keep them as captive. Many of them have become now your captive voters. Even if they want to get out of it, it isn't easy for them to get out. This is what is happening on the ground. To fight this isn't going to be easy. To fight this is possible, but it is not going to be easy. It is going to be a long-run battle. It requires a lot of conviction. It requires a lot of belief. Therefore, I say I do have belief, I do have conviction, because if I say I don't have the belief, I don't have the conviction, then nobody will put up a fight.
Yeah,
that's how I see it.
Right. Javed, the Samajwadi Party, one of the criticisms made of it, and of course the party, it's no mean achievement to go from 21% to 31 or 32%. That's an increase in 11%, swing in your favor. Great accomplishment. But somewhere down the line, there is a perception that the Samajwadi Party was a bit late in joining the battle, right? We know that during the farmers' movement, during the time of distress during COVID, various moments when a vibrant opposition could have made its presence felt, the party was really quite absent. Even if they weren't on the streets, it's not as if there was other kind of messaging. Do you feel that the Samajwadi Party woke up a little too late, and that this result might have been different if it was more dynamic, if it had paid attention to creating an active organization at every level throughout the last 5 years instead of just in the last 4 months?
Look, for one, Samajwadi, of all the opposition parties, the Samajwadi Party is the one that has an organization set up. So they haven't performed the way they have because of a lack of organizational setup. Yes, they ought to have started earlier. Protests, or whether it was Hathras, Unnao, wherever, whether it was school kids being served, that free lunch that is served in Mirzapur. She started then, and look where the Congress should augur. It may be true of the Congress and all this because they didn't have enough of a. They had a non-existent organizational structure, and if you've been out of power for 3 decades, then it's very difficult that in the first election you'll make a comeback. But yes, Akhilesh Yadav could have, but would it have made a difference to the overall result? I doubt. Just look at the way the ground rules have changed, Siddharth. You and I and all of us have covered these elections. Earlier, secularism was the buzzword, was the byword. Now forget the fact that nobody even talks about Muslims. People are afraid to even insert the word secularism in their manifestos or in their speeches. They don't. They make a conscious effort to shy away from this. In Bihar, Apurvananji gave the example when Nitish and Lalu had come together and Prashant Kishore was managing that election. There was a conscious decision that Muslims should stay back. They should not be on the dais, stay back. Even messages were sent out that the women should not prefer, if possible, avoid wearing burqas, come out late after lunch or around lunchtime, and then don't come out from early. Don't be, because they have this tendency of being in your face. So don't do these things. Slowly, the BJP has succeeded. Its main success has been that they changed the game, the rules of the game. Now people forget about minorities and everything. People are scared of using the word secularism. People look at the number of Muslim candidates that are put up across political parties. So we can have a debate, and it might sacrifice us intellectually, drawing a line between Hindutva and the rest. But the fact is that the ground rules have changed. They've changed. Mr. Modi addressed the DGP's conference, and he told, and one of the things he said, it stuck in my mind because somebody told me this. He was waxing eloquent on something. So one of the officers got up and said, "Sir, there might be a reaction to this." He says, "Aap ghabraiye mat, humne jan ka man badal diya." And there is more than an element of truth. Jan ka man badal diya. Because despite everything, despite the farmers' agitation, despite the fact that prices have risen, despite stray cattle, despite the gross mismanagement of COVID, despite the fact that so many people died, yet if all these things had come together, and despite all that, if the BJP performed the way that they did, then there is obviously something very serious which has changed drastically on the ground, and perhaps we have erred in not taking cognizance of it.
I want to turn to Congress's dilemma. Both of you, Purnand and Javed, you followed Congress party affairs. Apurva as an analyst, Javed as a journalist. Do you think, the Congress today is in a situation where they have said they will have elections, they will have a elected leader. Nothing has really moved on that front. You've had the group of 23 issuing a joint statement. Nothing has come of that. Do you think these results, the terrible showing in Uttar Pradesh for the Congress and the catastrophic loss in Punjab, and the failure of the Congress to make any difference in Goa or Uttarakhand or Manipur, will serve as a catalyst for the Congress to think anew about the question of leadership, or are they going to double down on the Gandhi family?
Look, knowing the Congress, whatever little I know of the Congress, I don't see a drastic major surgery happening. They'll say that elections are being held in September. They're just a couple of months away. If a new leadership has to emerge, let it emerge through that democratic process. Expecting anything great out of a UP campaign for the Congress is asking too much from them. But yes, the way they mismanaged Punjab, first you make a change and then you mismanage the transition, you botch it up in such a manner, the inability to control Navjot Singh Sidhu, he was an unguided missile. You, by accident or by design, you found a Chief Minister, Mr. Channi, you could have played the turret card, backed him to the field, empowered him. None of that happened. Sidhu was allowed to undermine. He first undermined Amrinder Singh, then allowed to undermine Channi. So they were like headless chickens in Punjab. And Mr. Amrinder Singh didn't run the best administration. They changed him, but yet then when you make a change, endorse it, go the whole hog. They didn't do that. In Goa and Uttarakhand, there was, I think they would, now they're saying that they are open to having a post-poll alliance. But why is this wisdom dawned now? Why couldn't they have done it during the elections? At least they ought to have done it with the NCP and the Shiv Sena. You're already in alliance with them.
No, but these are serious questions that any party ought to ask of its national leadership, right?
Absolutely.
But they're not being asked.
Yeah, so they'll have a CWC meeting. Everybody will say what they have to say, and then and Mr. Antony or somebody will be interested with, setting up an introspection committee, and at the end of the day,
the report will never come.
And if it comes, nobody will hear about it, and at the end of the day, they will hope that people will forget it, because the Congress really needs to ask itself some very serious questions, because it is in the process of, I don't see a revolt happening in the Congress, but a lot of people will leave, some people will leave, some will hang around, the Congress is becoming irrelevant. Other parties like AAP, there is a move on the Turnout Congress, NCP, all these former congressmen who've gone away, of all of them coming together. So, the Congress is faced with a serious existential crisis. I know we keep saying this after every elections, but it's just getting worse by the day. Right now, for the first time in its history, they are in power in only two of the 28 states in the Union of India. It's never been this bad. I don't know how much worse must it get for the Congress leadership to take cognizance.
Right. Apurva, as we switch gears directly into national politics, we have various, you spoke about the importance of ideology and the ideological battle. We have various models of state governments in front of us, which have, where ruling parties have held their own against BJP. उड़ीसा का अगर हम मिसाल लें तो वहाँ विचारधारा नाम की कोई चीज नहीं है, लेकिन नवीन बाबू जो है अपने सो कॉल्ड सुशासन के आधार पे जो भी है उनका अपना जो है बीजेपी को दूर उन्होंने रखा है, और बीजेपी वाले खुद मानते हैं कि अगले चुनाव में भी वो वहां पे खास इनरोड नहीं कर पाएंगे. Then you have the example, say, of DMK. Early days still, but the administration of MK Stalin does not shy away from ideological questions and has effectively blocked the BJP on all of its pet issues there. Not that BJP was much of a presence, but they don't shy away from some of those questions, and they're also combining it with the delivery of services as state governments in Tamil Nadu have tended to do. And you have also the left in Kerala, which again combines delivery and focus on administration, promotion of youth, etc., with not shying away from ideological questions, at least at the state level. But the counterfactual is Odisha, where the party does not fight or confront the BJP ideologically, yet still succeeds. Given what Seema says is the natural limitation of these parties, particularly at the national level, do you really see the Congress resurrecting itself organizationally as well as ideologically in order to be able to confront the challenge posed by the BJP?
अभी जैसी बात हुई, कांग्रेस के सामने एक बहुत बड़ी चुनौती है, और चुनौती है कि कांग्रेस है क्या. पहले कांग्रेस को खुद अपने इस सवाल का उत्तर देना है और अपने कार्यकर्ताओं को ये बतलाना है कि वो है क्या. इस प्रश्न का उत्तर दिए बिना हम सिर्फ अगर इस सवाल पर आएंगे कि कांग्रेस का नेतृत्व क्या है, कांग्रेस में नेतृत्व का सवाल सुलझ रहा है कि नहीं, और इस पर भी हमें विचार करना पड़ेगा कि वो क्यों नहीं सुलझ रहा है. असल में हमें जो सबसे आसान लगता है वो यह कि किसी भी पार्टी में जनतांत्रिक तरीके से काम होना चाहिए, चुनाव होने चाहिए और नतीजे आने चाहिए. मेरी कांग्रेस पार्टी के कार्यकर्ताओं से जो बातचीत होती रही पिछले 5 वर्षों में, उन्होंने कहा कि कांग्रेस एक अलग किस्म की पार्टी है, और अगर आप जैसे यूथ कांग्रेस में आप चुनाव कराएंगे तो उसके नतीजे कांग्रेस के लिए नुकसानदेह हो सकते हैं. ये मुझे खुद यूथ कांग्रेस के लोगों ने बतलाया. तो हर पार्टी की एक जटिलता होती है, कॉम्प्लेक्सिटी होती है उसकी बनावट की, उसका एक इतिहास है। दूसरे कि मुझे नहीं मालूम कि कांग्रेस में दरअसल नेतृत्व है क्या, अगर आप 2-3 लोगों को छोड़ देते हैं, राहुल गांधी और अब प्रियंका गांधी और सोनिया गांधी, उसके अलावा जिन लोगों का भी आप नाम लें, उनसे कांग्रेस का, देश के बाकी लोगों को छोड़ दीजिए, कांग्रेस का ही अलग अलग प्रदेश का कार्यकर्ता कोई रिश्ता नहीं बना पाता है। आप चिदंबरम की बात लें या उसके पहले जितने लोग थे जिनको जाने पर बहुत अफसोस जताया गया, वो सिंधिया हो या और तमाम लोग हों, कांग्रेस के कार्यकर्ता अभी भी अगर कोई रिश्ता महसूस करते हैं तो वो राहुल गांधी और प्रियंका गांधी से करते हैं। इस प्रश्न पर भी हम लोगों को विचार करना पड़ेगा। और अगर आप उन कार्यकर्ताओं से बात करेंगे तो सारी शिकायतों के बावजूद उनको उम्मीद उन्हीं से है, उनको उम्मीद बाकी लोगों से नहीं है, क्योंकि बाकी लोग, और मुझे हमेशा यह लगता रहा है वामपंथी दलों के संदर्भ में भी और बाकी संदर्भ में भी, कि राजनीति का मतलब दरअसल मेहनत करना है, बाहर निकलना है, सड़क पर जाना है, लोगों से बात करना है। अगर आप वो बात नहीं कर रहे हैं, वो गुलाम नबी आजाद हों, पी चिदंबरम हों, जयराम रमेश हों, बाकी तमाम लोग हों, तो आप नेता किस प्रकार के हैं? और कांग्रेस में बार बार हम फिर यह सवाल क्यों करते हैं कि सिर्फ गांधी परिवार है? क्योंकि आपने उनको एक गधे की तरह या घोड़े की तरह जोता हुआ है कि आप हमारे लिए चुनाव जीत कर दीजिए, और आप उनसे लगातार शिकायत करते हैं कि आप हमें चुनाव जीत कर नहीं दे रहे हैं, है ना। अब अगर दूसरे लोगों की बात कर लीजिए, मसलन छत्तीसगढ़ को आप देख लीजिए और राजस्थान को देख लीजिए। हमने विचारधारात्मक प्रश्न की बात की। छत्तीसगढ़ में लगभग सारे विश्वविद्यालयों के कुलपति राष्ट्रीय स्वयंसेवक संघ के हैं। राजस्थान में लगभग सारे विश्वविद्यालयों के कुलपति राष्ट्रीय स्वयंसेवक संघ के हैं।
और छत्तीसगढ़ में आदिवासियों के अधिकारों पे हमला अभी भी जारी है।
अभी भी जारी है। तो इस प्रश्न में भी उम्मीद ये की जाती है कि राहुल गांधी और प्रियंका गांधी भूपेश बघेल और अशोक गहलोत से बात करें। अशोक गहलोत की इसमें कोई दिलचस्पी नहीं है कि विचारधारात्मक रूप से या सांस्कृतिक रूप से राज्य का क्या हो रहा है, या भूपेश बघेल भी उसको किस दिशा में ले जा रहे हैं। तो हमें कांग्रेस के भीतर की डायनेमिक्स को भी देखने की बहुत जरूरत है। ये काफी पेचीदा सवाल है, और क्योंकि कांग्रेस परंपरा से एक प्लेटफॉर्म के रूप में देखती आई है खुद को। जब तक सत्ता थी तब तक तो दक्षिणपंथी भी उसमें थे, वामपंथी भी थे, बीच के भी थे, और सत्ता ने गोंद की तरह जोड़ रखा था। सत्ता चली गई तो फिर दक्षिणपंथी और वामपंथियों का संघर्ष, और उसमें अभी वामपंथी के रूप में राहुल गांधी दिखलाई पड़ रहे हैं, और इसलिए चारों तरफ से उन पर हमला भी हो रहा है। मैं कोई राहुल गांधी की तरफ से ब्रीफ नहीं ले रहा हूं, लेकिन मैं कह रहा हूं कि कांग्रेस में और कौन है जो एक वैचारिक दृष्टि प्रदान
शायद उनको मौका नहीं मिला तो जाने वाले टू कम इन।
Yeah. You know, everybody says that they should put in the hard yards. Honestly, put your hand on your heart and say, has there been any other Congress leader apart from Priyanka Gandhi who's put in the kind of effort that she has in UP consistently from day one? कांग्रेस का प्रॉब्लम ये है वो 30 साल से सरकार में नहीं रहे, उनकी कोई ऑर्गेनाइजेशन नहीं, बट लुक एट द काइंड ऑफ एफर्ट दैट शी हैज मेड, and the Congress would be doing itself the biggest disservice if they remove her from Uttar Pradesh. इन्होंने जैसे आम आदमी ने शुरू में पंजाब में किया था वो इनकी स्थिति है. You should allow her to continue. I know this is just the wrong time to be saying this, but allow her to continue, and in an election or two from now, you'll see the results.
Seema, Rajesh, as we move towards the end of our discussion, I want you to put your sort of thinking cap on to tell us what might happen at the national level in terms of opposition politics. We know that Mamata Banerjee, we know that MK Stalin, so Mamata Banerjee has a certain conception. Stalin has spoken about federal front. They both have excellent relations with the Samajwadi Party. They're wooing some of the other opposition ruled states. But do you see this process growing in the next month, the next few months and years in the run-up to 24? And if so, can a challenge to the BJP happen without an acceptable figurehead or face of this challenge? That's the question that is top of one's mind as you reflect on, as I reflect on the results today and what happens next. How do you see the opposition sort of space changing, and within that, the role of the Congress? Because the Congress, Stalin's famous comment about the Pope, J.V. Stalin, not MK. J.V. Stalin's famous comment about the Pope during World War II: how many divisions does he have? And so, how many divisions does the Congress have now? I mean, earlier one used to say that you can't have a third front or a united front without the ballast of the Congress, but the Congress doesn't have that ballast anymore. So, given all of these considerations, how do you see the opposition at the national level developing over the next 2 years?
Jumping, Rajesh, that's okay. So I'd really like to quote Mao Zedong, who said it's like too early to tell about the impact of the French Revolution. So I think the next 2 years is going to be sort of really critical and interesting. And of course, I agree with Rajesh, it's not the end of the world, but there are some very important signals that we must pick up and draw the right lessons from. At first hand, if you remember, there was this whole lot of uthal-puthal in Bihar as well, which was dependent on what would happen in UP. So I think parties like that, the HAM, the other smaller parties, which were anxious to jump into the opposition space, or even people like KCR in Telangana, may review the way in which and the terms in which they want to oppose the BJP. Because they may choose to be like AAP, political opponents of the BJP, but not ideological opponents. They may change dramatically the metrics in which they're opposing the BJP. That would have an impact on opposition politics. Of course, whatever Manthan happens, I don't know what G23 is going to be up to. It's a prime moment for them to jump up and say issue their usual statements. That would be critical. I think we must watch closely the presidential polls, which are due in a few months. I think that would provide us with a theatre, kind of a viewing of what that opposition politics would be and how that would play itself out. And of course, as Rajesh says, in case the farm laws come in again, etc., if there are immediate triggers the BJP applies in order to, just crank up the machine more and move quickly, or if they call for early elections in Karnataka, I think that would also completely change how the opposition functions. But it's clearly a time of great interest. And I don't think people like Mamata Banerjee and also would be very happy, because she comes into this other stack. She was viewed as a big challenger, etc., but that has taken a beating in Goa. And she also unfortunately comes into the band of old world parties that are not doing well in this whole space. So I would wait and watch. And for me, the eyes would be on, of course, Parliament as it convenes, on how parties behave and they position themselves. And I'd watch the presidential polls keenly to see how they position themselves. Do they back the BJP candidate or not? From where I think we can draw further conclusions about how 2024 may pan out.
Correct. And Rajesh Mahapatra, final closing thoughts from you on the lay of the land nationally as we proceed to the next, next general election.
I believe that the hub or epicenter of all possible political realignment in 2024 is going to be Chennai. M.K. Stalin would be playing a very, very important role. And I was listing out all the trends that would kind of get amplified. After this, I think the attack on federalism would get worse in time to come. And there is going to be a very different kind of momentum that's going to build up. You can anticipate that. And there are other issues tied to that, because the way the economy is going, there are issues around state finances that are going to now crop up. And that's going to amplify the trends that we see in the space of the federal governance space. So I would like to believe that there is going to be a lot of realignment that is going to happen among regional parties, and Stalin would be playing a very key role in all of that. Mamata has been there, but I think at some point in time she will have to take a back seat. And if she doesn't, then it will be a fragmented position of regional parties in the country. But so that's just the way. With the 3 losses today, Congress rank and file might be feeling demoralized. Come December, if they win Karnataka, if they win Madhya Pradesh, if they win Rajasthan, and if there is a regional alignment that is in place, they will be back in the game. Congress is an idea. Congress is not a party. It has never succeeded. Congress cannot succeed by building up an organization to compete with BJP. Congress has to compete as an idea and making that idea acceptable, embraced by people, and championed by people. And I think they have it in them. I think there are certain things that Rahul has been talking about. They're not bad things. As an idea, it works. There are certain contradictions they have to resolve, and they must resolve them very soon. So only reason why we keep getting demoralized that we see that they're kind of crying out your patience when you say that why are these things not getting resolved? Well, they are not so easy to resolve, but eventually they will find a resolution. Otherwise, you will see something coming out in the days to come. So for Congress, you cannot just write them off yet. And for the regional parties, I think they're still there, very much fighting. Uh, I don't think any of the regional politics has been significantly dented or is going to be dented by after this election, because I think many of them are holding forth pretty strong. As recent as 2 weeks ago, Odisha held the panchayat elections. You saw what happened with BJP, which had gotten 300 plus seats last time. They were reduced to 30. It was a landslide victory for Navin Patnaik. BJP has suffered a severe setback. Unfortunately, the national media doesn't talk about it. And similarly, in corporation elections, we saw what happened in Chennai. So there is a lot that has to happen. Picture abhi baki hai.
This has been a very dramatic day today in terms of election results. The BJP has managed a 4-0 performance, winning all of the states that it held power in earlier: Uttar Pradesh, Uttarakhand, Goa, and Manipur. Of course, the EC, the Election Commission, has yet to declare results, but we're going by the leads and trends. And Aam Aadmi Party has devastated the Congress in Punjab. What we have been discussing over the last two hours are the broad national implications and the kind of questions that we have tried to shed light on, but which will remain with us over the next few months in the run-up to 2024. Don't forget that the Lok Sabha elections are now a little bit over 2 years away. What role does the Aam Aadmi Party hope to play nationally? Can it build on its Punjab victory and its entry into Goa with 2 seats to present itself as more of a national player? The Congress, which is now reduced to simply having power in Rajasthan and Chhattisgarh, a shadow of its former self. What can the Congress possibly do to revive its fortunes, not just in the states that it lost, but nationally? And the Bharatiya Janata Party, what results, what analysis and what conclusions is it going to draw from today's results, particularly Uttar Pradesh? If it concludes, based on its own use of Hindutva at different levels in the campaign, that today's result from Uttar Pradesh is a validation or vindication of its reliance on communal politics, chances are that the party, both at the state level and nationally, will find multiple and new ways of doubling down on its communal agenda. If the party decides to do that, that will, of course, spell trouble as far as social harmony in the country is concerned. If the party also concludes that it now has a license to proceed apace with farm laws that farmers oppose, privatization and other kinds of economic policies that are seem to benefit India's largest corporations, if the BJP aggressively pursues those, chances are that this will increase economic dislocation as far as the broad masses are concerned. And what political consequences that will have? Will the BJP, does the BJP believe that the communal polarization can offset whatever loss of support the party might have because of its economic agenda? That seems to be the central dilemma that the party will confront as it takes us on from today to the next election cycle. Even before the results came out, Mr. Modi fired an opening salvo in Gujarat the other day. Gujarat, of course, is the next big state where elections will be held, and then you have a few other large states, Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, Chhattisgarh, Karnataka is also due between now and the next general election. So plenty more in terms of politics, plenty more in terms of elections. The Wire, which has covered these elections and has covered the policies that have driven the Bharatiya Janata Party's campaign, will be there every step of the way. So do continue to read us at thewire.in in English, and of course in Hindi, Urdu, and Marathi. And do continue tuning in to our YouTube channel for videos on politics, on political economy, on all the other topics that we do in English and Hindi. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't already done so. Thank you very much, Seema Chishti, Rajesh Mahapatra, Javed Ansari, Dr. Purvanand, for being with us, and thank you all to our viewers for being with us for this marathon session.
Thank you.